Okay, my name is Kyle Haynes. I'm an associate professor of political science at Purdue University. Yeah, so the war has changed in a lot of ways. I think in a lot of ways the war has kind of been through three main phases, right? So in the initial phase of the war, Russia made kind of a mad dash toward Kyiv, trying to basically take over, all or most of the country. After that initial attack stalled out, Ukrainian forces pushed the Russians back. There was a, significant retreat of Russian forces at first. And this gave way to a more kind of grinding fight. But the Ukrainian forces continued making advances, both in the north and the south, throughout the fall and into the early winter. And since then, right, the fighting has kind of, it hasn't died down, but there hasn't been a lot of movement in the front lines. But I think the next phase of the war, starting in the early spring, is likely to be pretty important, if not decisive, as both sides are going to be probably launching significant offensives, trying to really achieve their most expansive war aims. Unfortunately, I think both sides' war aims are totally incompatible with each other. Ukraine pretty clearly aims to retake all of its territory prior to 2014, including Crimea, whereas Russia is basically trying to take as much Ukrainian territory as it possibly can, and at the very least, maintain control over the Crimean Peninsula and the four oblasts that it claimed and formally annexed late in 2022. So both sides are basically aiming to take as much of the disputed territory as they possibly can. And whether either side is going to be willing to settle for less than what they've claimed is kind of an open question. Ukraine will not be willing to cede any of its territory without putting up a serious fight. And Russia, by all appearances, seems to be willing to suffer pretty significant costs in order to take these chunks of Ukrainian territory. So in terms of a final resolution, I think we may still be a long ways off. I do think the next few months could be pretty decisive. If Ukraine is able to launch a really effective offensive and take back more of its territory, that will encourage maybe further Western aid that would enable it to continue fighting and making further advances. If, however, Ukrainian offensive actions kind of stall out, and it looks like retaking the territory that Russia has occupied is going to be prohibitively costly, if not impossible, then there may be external pressure to push Ukraine toward a negotiated settlement. But importantly, I think that even if there is a negotiated settlement, there's a good chance that the underlying conflict will not be resolved. Putin will still not be happy with a hostile, firmly pro-Western state on its borders, and Ukraine will never feel secure next to Russia as long as Putin or someone like him is in power. So even if there is a ceasefire or even some kind of formal negotiated settlement, I think there's a decent chance that the underlying conflict is going to remain simmering for quite a while into the future.